Good afternoon, everyone. Now let's talk about pragmatics and speech acts. What is pragmatics? Pragmatics it is the study of contextual meaning, the study of speaker meaning, the study of utterance meaning, the study of meaning beyond the sentence level. Difference between semantics and pragmatics. Semantics study word, phrase, and sentence meaning, whereas the pragmatics studies utterance meaning. Context independent has nothing to do with context, whereas pragmatics is context dependent, like you can never arrive at an interpretation for an utterance without studying the context. Therefore, we say that is decontextualized, whereas pragmatics is contextualized. Semantics studies the meaning on sentence level, whereas pragmatics studies meaning beyond the sentence level. Also, semantics focuses on the literal meaning, whereas pragmatics focuses on the intended meaning or the speaker meaning. Semantics focuses on meaning in abstraction, whereas pragmatics focuses on meaning. Now, we're going to study the difference from semantics and pragmatics. Now, here's the example. If someone says, it's hot in here, so the sentence meaning for the sentence is that the temperature in the place where the speaker at is above average. And it is the only semantic interpretation for this sentence is the literal meaning of the sentence, whereas when this sentence is uttered by a speaker in different contexts, and it may have different intended meaning. For example, the speaker meaning, open the window please, or turn on the AC. So it depends on the speaker intention. So what is the importance of pragmatics? Pragmatics provides us with a full and depth account of human language behavior, or that's why they call it, or they define it, pragmatics as language in use, or how humans use language. Pragmatics explain the use of every aspect of language, either phonetics, syntax, vocabulary, spelling, and etc. Now, one of the main definition pragmatics is that pragmatics it is the study of meaning in context. Therefore, context is vital to the study of pragmatics. Now, pragmatics is context dependent, like we cannot understand the pragmatics if we don't understand the context. Okay, what is context? Context is the environment in which the utterance takes place, and it is the situation of the utterance, the discourse that surrounds the utterance and help to determine its interpretation, the aspect of the circumstances of actual language use which are taken as relevant to meaning. Now, context is also classified into the following types. So there are 4 different types of context. First is the linguistic context, called context. Number 2, physical context. Number 3, social context. And number 4 is epistemic context. So let's start first with the linguistic context. So linguistic context, it refers to the words and sentence surrounding any part of a discourse that help to determine its meaning. Sometimes it is called context. So, it refers to the relationship between the words, phrases, sentences, and even paragraphs. And it is the set of all the other words used in an utterance or sentence. So, here's the example. The word mole, which is a homonym which has two meanings. Either it is small animal or skin mark. So we will not be understood unless it is used in linguistic context. So if we have the word mole in a sentence like this, she has a nice mole on her lip cheek. So now this linguistic, which is marked in black, which help us to determine the meaning of the word mole. So we will understand that it is the skin mark. Now, all words surrounding the word mole is the linguistic. Physical context. The physical context refers to objects surrounding the communication at the time of utterance, such as table, chairs, cars, and signs. And it is also referred to place and time of utterance, when and where the communication is taking place. Also, it refers to the action which are taking place around the speaker or communication. So, in order to understand the idea of physical context, we will explain the following example. So, if you are driving and you see a sign that reads, slow down children crossing the road. So, of course, you will know that you are driving in front of a school, then you have to drive slowly in order not to run any student over. So, example number 2. Teacher to the student, come to my office at 12 p.m. tomorrow. So when a teacher says to a student, come to my office at 12 p.m. tomorrow, so the physical context will indicate the time and the place, reference of this utterance, and it indicates that at the time of the utterance. Social context. It is a very important type of context. It refers to the relationship between participants in the communication. Example, student and teacher relationship, father and son relationship, and husband, wife and relationship. Now, the following example on the relationship between participants in a conversation now, which is appropriate to be said and which is inappropriate to be said. For example, student to teacher, give me the book and go home. So, this would be inappropriate because the student does not have the power to ask the teacher to give him the book and go home. Now, son to father, hurry up and bring me some water. So, this is also be inappropriate because the son does not have the status to ask his father to do so. However, if the father tells his son to bring him water, this would be appropriate. Now, husband to wife, honey, could you make me a cup of tea? So this would be appropriate. The last one is the epistemic context. It refers to the background knowledge and beliefs of the participant, speaker, or hearer in the communication. Example 1. The speaker A. Have you seen Jane? Listener B. The black car is across the street. So, at this sentence or utterance, we'll notice that they are incoherent, that the conversation seems incoherent, like there is no relationship between the first utterance and the second utterance. However, if we know that the speaker A and the listener B know that Jane has a black car, then the conversation will seem coherent, and can be easily to understood. Now, there are three types of speech act. Talking about the speech act, it has types of it. First is the locutionary act. Second is an illocutionary act. The last one is a perlocutionary act. So, a locutionary act, it is the actual of uttering the actual word uttered. So, example, please do the dishes. So, it is an locutionary act. So, an illocutionary act is the social function of what is said, the force or intention behind the words or uttering the locution. Please do the dishes. So the speaker requests the addressee to wash the dishes. And a perlocutionary act, it is the resulting act of what is said, the effect of the locution on the hearer. This effect is based on the particular context in which the speech act was mentioned. Please do the dishes. So, it would lead to the addressee washing the dishes. Now, difference between direct and indirect speech act. Direct speech acts whenever there is a direct relationship between a structure and a function. So, example, you wear a seatbelt. So, the structural form is declarative. Do you wear a seatbelt? So, the structural is the interrogative. Wear a seatbelt and is imperative. Indirect speech acts. If the relationship between the structure and function is indirect, e.g. declarative used to make a request, it's cold outside can be interpreted as a request to close the door. So, though a declarative function is to make a statement, but in this case, a declarative used to make a request. So, between the structure and function is indirectly. Felicity condition. Is referred to the effectiveness of speech acts use of the speaker. Speaker Austin in 1962 said that in using speech acts, one has to fulfill certain conditions regarding act that is being used. So, example, I pronounce you husband and wife. So, this kind of utterance is usually used by a priest or any other religious leader to pronounce a marriage between a man and woman. So, then this kind of utterance should be brought upon the wedding in a, for instance, church, without the special privilege of a priest or any other individual given the special privilege to marry people. This kind of utterance will not be recognized as an appropriate use of speech act, or it has a different intention. Now, speech act in context. Context is about understanding what things for. It is also what gives our utterance their true meaning. When a sentence is uttered, more has taken place than merely the expression of its meaning. For example, teacher, what are you laughing? So, student answered, nothing. So, first is between teacher and student. So, this conversation takes place in the room during learning process. So, the teacher asks the student, what are you laughing? And the student responds, nothing. So, in this conversation of the teacher is she or he not really asking why the student is laughing. It's because the teacher simply asks the student to be quiet and pay attention to the teacher. Now, elements of context. Jaime proposed in 1974 proposed a component of context which is known as speaking. So S, sitting, P for participant, E for ends, A for act, K for case, I for instrumentalities, N for norms, G for genre. So sittings is refers to time and place and circumstances of a speech act. So it's about where or when the speech act takes place. Now, P, participant. It includes the speaker and the audience. So this is about involved in a speech act. Now, ends. Ends is refers to call or purposes of speech act. Act. Act is refers to sequence of a speech act that makes up the event. Now K is refers of tone of a speech act. And instrumentalities, these include the channel used to perform a speech act like method of communication of speech acts, either spoken nor written. Now, norms is this includes social rules that manage the event. And the last one is genre. This kind of speech act is like stories, speech, or casual conversation. So these are some elements that better understand of a speech act. Thank you for listening. God bless.